Welcome to the Epic Mercury Show. I am your host, Epic Mercury. Sometimes I feel like, at least for me, as a content creator of any kind, that I have so many show ideas and so many things I want to talk about that I will never get around to doing all of them. And I must admit that I get paralyzed on occasion by just the number of ideas piling up. So I'm going to do the best I can to be better about that going forward. I feel like I would have to record a podcast every day for the rest of my life in order to get everything across. But maybe this is just a problem with introverts in general. There's a lot going on internally in the mind, but not a lot is typically said externally in social circumstances. So this show was originally going to be about Aleister Crowley, and I will definitely cover him next time. Might even record that podcast later today or tomorrow. But I wanted to cover something that I found, at least from my perspective, as just a human being living on the earth, as an American, I found disturbing and reckless. I am all for what they call UFO, UAP disclosure to some degree, to a limited degree. As a psychic and a trained remote viewer, like 20 years now, I've had a chance to remote view many, many interesting targets, enigma targets, UFO targets, things that would be just considered very strange. And my goal, of course, is to help people raise their consciousness to think things through, not only analytically, but then on top of it, also develop their intuition, whether that's by meditation or by helping them develop remote viewing skills, which will help them tap into the collective unconscious, what's been referred to as the Akashic Records, the Matrix in the initial remote viewing program, just a database where we can go acquire information about people, places, things, and events in the universe. I am firmly convinced that the best way to go about learning and growing, besides absorbing information through our five senses, of course, is this intuitive process. It's far too easy, especially in today's digital world where people are, heck, even half the things being put out are by AI. And just an interesting note on that really quick, just a quick tangent. Law firms that have been using AI to help them with their letters and run their cases have found themselves in deep trouble, in some cases even lawsuits, because the AI makes up statutes that weren't there and cites them in the legal briefings. This is becoming a problem. So the digital realm, the internet, it all has its place. But if we allow ourselves, our mind, to be completely absorbed into it and think that we're going to always be getting reliable information from the internet, that's a serious error, serious mistake. Okay, getting back to UFO disclosure, UAP disclosure. Today on the Weaponized podcast, Jeremy Corbell had on a guest named Matthew Brown, and he is the author of a report to Congress that was submitted a few months ago called Immaculate Constellation. And I've listened very intently, having looked at a lot of UAP, UFO targets over the years. I was very interested in the things that Matthew had to say. And he seems very conscientious, somewhat idealistic, and more than a little bit ideologically driven. This is a man who had access to the secret internet, so to speak, used by the intelligence services and military intelligence branches that had misfiled files, clips, audio files, video files of things that were, and he was basically supposed to be going to clean this up when he came across these UAP files on the server. And I agree with almost everything that Matthew Brown said in this podcast. It was the Weaponized Immaculate Constellation podcast number 3, the last one. The problem I have with, again, I'm fully for disclosure on this level, but I really think it needs to be an inside job. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to dig up external sources, but we as a species We are nowhere near as mature as we think we are. We need to develop ourselves. We need to develop not only our emotional resilience, but our extrasensory perception and raise our consciousness. And we have an experience, we have an event that happened 5 years ago, which points clearly to the fact that we're not mature enough to handle every piece of information that comes our way. COVID. What did everybody do with COVID? They went crazy. I mean, we couldn't buy paper. What was it? Toilet paper for the longest time. Everyone wanted to hoard everything. People were going ballistic with their overprotective measures. I mean, there. How much more data do we need to see that the smallest? This was a virus. Now, I'm going to say that I don't think this virus was much rougher than a rough cold, and it was exaggerated. But just the way the public reacted to it is alarming and telling at what gets the public to behave in such an irrational manner. I mean, there were fights breaking out over toilet paper. And you got to ask yourself, why was it mostly women, but why were all these women out there practically getting into fistfights about toilet paper? And of course, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this is a control issue. This is just these women wanting some sense of control when they feel completely out of control. And for some reason, toilet paper became the focus. But to sit here and say that we human beings, oh, we can handle disclosure, we're super mature, it doesn't matter what's revealed or how weird or dark or strange some of the things are, that interacting with non-human intelligence is coming. We're perfectly capable of handling it. It doesn't matter whether it interferes with national security issues. It doesn't matter if, we find out that human beings can be abducted, for sure. Like the government says, human beings can be abducted anywhere at any time by these non-human intelligences, and there's nothing the government can do to stop it. So it's not that I'm not for disclosure, but I'm way more interested in humanity developing itself, developing, raising its consciousness, developing those extrasensory senses, really trying to develop as people rather than just consumers who sit around demanding to be handed everything. If it's one thing I've discovered being a psychic my whole life, and then really developing, especially with remote viewing, a very precise, refined skill. A quick example. Remote viewing is an amazing skill. The basics are relatively simple to learn. It's done with a pen and paper. You never close your eyes. There are stages you develop the information in totally in the blind. In other words, you don't know what the target is. This is literally a life-changing skill. Now, it's kind of like almost anything else. To really develop any skill, you really need to practice for a significant amount of time. You need to have really a proper trainer, or you need to put in a large variety of targets that are really going to stretch your extrasensory capabilities. But it's certainly, within 4 months, I could say somebody could get to the basic level. I personally have taken time, and I've talked to my friend Brett Stewart about this the other day. I have taken personal time. I've trained at least 10 people where I really invested a ton of energy into training them. And they got past the basic training. They really got very proficient with remote viewing. And they came across one or two disturbing targets that they didn't like the data from. They didn't like the answer. And it was developed in the blind. One girl in particular, I remember, she thought that maybe somehow when I was training her, I was giving her suggestions or something. I was somehow broadcasting what the blind targets were. So I told her how to create her own blind target pool. I told her how to set things up, how to cue the pictures if she wanted to look at something specific in the pictures, how to look at unknown targets, like things that we don't really know whether they're real, like Adam and Eve or something like that. Because there's a lot of debate about whether they're real. And I'll get into that in just a second, by the way, just to illustrate. But for instance, especially if there were biblical mysteries that people wanted to take a look at, The folks who were anti-Christian, who were really against the Bible, when they would come across, let's say, a blind target like the Tower of Babel, and they were sketching a real structure, and they could tell that people were really building something. The idea that there was any reality, that there was anything in human history that could be associated, no matter how loosely, with the Tower of Babel, they would go into a panic thinking that every single event and everything mentioned in the Bible is absolutely real, and they would stop remote viewing. Now, I can just tell you from experience, there's a lot of truth in the Bible, not only philosophically, religiously, metaphysically, but also event-wise, things that actually happened. Does this mean that whatever version of Christianity you were raised in, typically the people who become anti-Christians, of course, had bad experiences in Christianity, bad experiences with church, lousy people, they got molested, whatever happened. Coming across a target like that does not mean that Christianity as a whole, or every single aspect of your particular sect of Christianity, is true. You got a tool that allows you to scan all of this stuff and take a look. And if you have this awesome perceptive tool, why wouldn't you use it? Part of becoming a mature being and growing, just becoming an adult, hell, is learning to accept things that you don't necessarily like. But I will tell you one, the anti-Christians who flip out when they come across to admit that there's any validity anywhere in the Bible, they're not ready to be remote viewers. They're certainly not ready to really use their extrasensory perception in a constructive way. They want only the answers that they want. Now, I could get into other religions and the mystical connections between Christianity, between Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. I'm not going to get into that in this episode, but I'm just giving you an example here. There's far more unity than people suspect. But let's get back to the topic of the UAP thing and the Immaculate Constellation whistleblower, Matthew Brown. The UAP topic is complex. There's a lot of different races. There's a lot of different motivations. There are different militaries involved who have different pieces of technology. They've reversed engineered certain things. But to sit here like as an American, as a child, and just demand that everything that the United States government knows about UAPs, extra dimensional beings, or anything should just instantly be disclosed is foolishness. Look at what happened during COVID, a virus. It was a virus. And people want to demand, like a 4-year-old demanding a knife. I want to know everything that we're ready. We're totally ready for all this. We can handle everything. Just tell us. And half these people would be hiding in their their shitty little apartment, shitting themselves in their bathroom. When if the information were actually revealed, they'd literally probably kill themselves. This is utter foolishness. Now, I'm not saying everybody who wants to know about the UAPs needs to go to develop psychically and learn the remote viewing skill, but it's a far more constructive approach than demanding that the government reveal stuff to you that's going to send you into an absolute tizzy, destroy society, destroy the banking system, destroy real estate. I mean, people are completely and utterly naive to believe that all of this could be disclosed at once and there would be no negative repercussions. As Matthew Brown, idiot, absolute idiot, says, "Oh, I think if it was all disclosed, it would be indifference with the American public." Are you fucking serious? It would be indifference. I mean, look, again, I think obviously very intelligent guy. Maybe he's a little bit on the autism spectrum or something like that. But for him to think that he's honoring his oath by disclosing this information and coming out this way, he's not honoring his oath. Clearly, he knows the papers he signed. He knows everything. He's breaking his oath. And I'm not going to sit here and say that no oath should ever be broken, right? But for him to sit here and say, or have it, that he's honoring his oath by disclosing this information is asinine. I am all for controlled disclosure. But I can tell you again, from remote viewing, a ton of targets over the past 20 years. And I obviously don't know everything. I haven't looked at everything. I haven't looked at every photo. There's a ton of stuff to research, which is why I think everybody needs to learn some, especially with if you want UAP data. Remote viewing is the skill for you. It is precise enough to get the data that you want. If you're just interested in higher spirituality, your purpose in life, navigating life in a constructive and wise way, well, meditation works just fine. You can get all of those answers intuitively through meditation. And another dirty word that most non-Christians don't like to hear, prayer. Prayer works too. As a matter of fact, prayer and meditation are far closer as a state of consciousness than you would realize. But that's, again, another topic for another time. Matthew said at the end of his interview, toward the end of the Weaponized podcast, that he doesn't think that there's any benevolent reason or motivation for the United States government to keep this stuff secret. He thinks it's all just greedy corporations, the elite wanting to keep all this technology for themselves. And it really, listening to him, I'm like, I'm listening to a communist. I'm literally listening to a Marxist. There can't be any other reason. We got to, all of this has to be disclosed to the people. And Marxism is such an unbelievably self-defeating philosophy. I can't believe that anybody even adheres to it. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. To think that there's no benevolent reason. Okay, let's say that no benevolent reason. Considering if everything was disclosed, because some of these aliens are really fucking scary. They are up to nefarious stuff. And some of them view us like we would ants on an anthill. Not all of them. There are benevolent ones out there too. There are kind of neutral ones. There are ones that, there are aliens out there. How would humanity do it? Now, again, I'm going to say this because I'm just a psychic, right? Supposedly in modern society, I have no credibility. So me saying this it's not going to shake anybody's world up. But if we just knew that there was one alien species out there somewhere in our local galactic neighborhood who wants to destroy us and would destroy us if we were not protected by another alien race, how would they deal with that? Again, I'm willing to say this because I know how people view psychics. I have no credibility. But just as a thought experiment, how would some people deal with that? Not very well. So the idea that all of this information is being held back, sure, there might be some selfishness there because the people who are in control of this information don't want to see the banking system collapse. They don't want to see their family's normal experience and life go down the drain in an instant, and the United States become forget the United States, the world become an apocalyptic hellhole overnight. Yeah, that's pretty damn selfish, isn't it? Wow, they're just really, again, the naivety, the immaturity of people that think that there's only one motivation, like Matthew Brown in this retarded, there's only one reason anybody could be wanting to keep any of this secret. It's honestly, it's time not only with the UAP stuff, but with the psychic stuff. That one quick example, and I'll stop this rant. Many people, and I've seen this for years, many people want to develop their psychic abilities. Many people want to learn how to meditate. Many people want to learn how to remote view. Now, the fact of the matter is, especially with most Americans, they're consumers, they're lazy, and they don't want to actually put any effort into anything. But if they do, at some point, something, because their outer personality is relatively narrow in its development, something disturbing comes up. Something disturbing comes up during a meditation. They're called to account for something. They reflect on all of a sudden something from their past pops up and they see how they were unbelievably wrong in certain situations. They misbehaved and they really hurt people. Guess what? Your inner self is going to give you that information. It's going to let you know when you've fallen short of the ideal and you haven't been motivated by higher aspirations to be the best human being you can be. It's not all love and light. Your spiritual growth, just like working out, there's going to be pain. There's going to be pain. There's going to be loss. Now, in my view, it's worth it, but in many people's, it's not. It's not worth it to develop that. I think it is. So that's why I'm going to continue doing this podcast and giving as much information as I can to one, be a guide for people. But at the same time, I really don't, I'm going to reveal certain things in the podcast, but it's not like I want to reveal all of the answers that I know about everything either. I, I mean, if I want people to develop, I'm robbing them of their own experience. You know, there's a movement in ancient times, and most people here in the West tend to know about the Gnostic Christians, but it was called Gnosticism. And I don't buy every teaching about Gnosticism. Some of the Gnostic Christians, for instance, believe that the earth is evil, that matter is evil, that we're enslaved here. I don't feel that way at all. We're in a school, and as painful as it is, it's the best school in the universe for us at our current stage of development. A lot of them also believe that Jesus, Yeshua, was not a physical being and didn't really suffer, that it was kind of an illusion. That absolutely is not the case. There was a man, Yeshua Nazareth, and I'm not going to go into the metaphysical subtleties of everything involved, but more or less you could say that he was who he said he was. Let's just keep in mind that he didn't claim to be God. That was other people after him. Enough said. But the one doctrine that Gnosticism did have was it had this idea of inner light, of inner wisdom, of you getting your own personal revelation that would teach you the truth about things in ways that only you would understand. And I can attest to that, whether it's by developing meditation, remote viewing, or both. You can tap into the Akashic records, the divine mind, cosmic consciousness, however you want to phrase it. You can tap into that and you can learn a lot. And that is the best way to go, rather than having somebody reveal it to you, even somebody like me who's marketed my services as a psychic for years. And I finally had to come to the conclusion that I'm really doing a disservice for people by revealing some of this information. I should be encouraging them to develop their own perceptive abilities, because no matter how eloquent I am, no matter how well intended I can be, I can't explain certain things because I'm not divinity. I'm not cosmic consciousness coming down into somebody's mind and enlightening them in a way that is uniquely meant for them. I'm still a limited human being. No matter how far along on the path to enlightenment I am or want to think I am. As I've said many times before in the past, you have a divine spark within you, and you need to. I always wondered in some of these mystical teachings of the past, where the way the soul was referred to as something separate from people. You don't want to lose your soul, so to speak. And there is some truth to that, because ultimately our soul is that divine spark. It's that part that is directly connected with divinity. And our soul personality, or our outer personality, has been developed by our experiences in this lifetime, and sometimes by memories from previous lifetimes. But still, we're not perfect. We don't take everything into account. And we need to cultivate. We actually need to put effort and cultivate gaining access to our soul, or the inner self. And it knows all the answers. It knows all the answers to all the questions you're ever going to ask. And it can give you not only transcendental knowledge, but also practical knowledge about what you should be doing, where you should be working, who you should be in a relationship with. And people are very, very, very unique. So there's not a one size fits all. Everybody wants to keep doing this one size fits all. And I'm all for social conformity to make things easy. But as far as people being on their own unique path, or what is referred to in remote viewing as an optimal trajectory, they're really unique. Anyway, I've gone off on that tangent just a little bit too much. But the bottom line here is, if you want to learn, or let me put it this way, if you want to be ready for some of the disclosure information coming forward, you should learn remote viewing. At a minimum, you should learn how to meditate. You should gain more experience with other aspects and other levels of consciousness, your personality, and your soul. And there's far more answers there that are going to help you. But as far as me, with the stuff that I've taken a look at over the years, relating to UAP, there's no way I would tell people half the stuff I know. There's no, absolutely no good would come of it. So again, I'm for controlled disclosure. I like these things, but let's keep in mind that not only is the topic way more complex than we want to think, but there are government officials out there that are dealing with this stuff who absolutely have our best interest in mind. And to naively think that they don't is it's just childish. If people are complex and people have complex motivations. And sure, there might be some people out there going, "Damn, I'm going to make a lot of money. We're going to get a military edge up over Russia or China." I'm positive there are people involved in it doing that. But some people absolutely feel that this needs to be completely kept secret or at least disclosed very, very slowly because it is information. Again, full disclosure, everything the government knows, our society, our civilization would not be here. So I'm telling you, please stop pretending that you're that damn mature. You're not. If you want to gain access to this type of information in a slow manner that you're going to be able to adapt to, and you're still going to have disturbing moments, then you want to learn remote viewing. And just keep in mind, it's not just the skills. Some of the context, some of the information you're going to come across is going to be quite disturbing. And there will be, if you develop your skills properly, there will be no doubt in your mind because there are blind targets, there are double blind targets, there are ways to protect against things getting too far off track where you know beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're right. So in ancient times, what we used to call this was or ancient mystery schools is the process of initiation. And that's why certain information was held back from prospective students. That not only involves our spiritual development here on the earth, but beings that come from outside of the earth. So with that, I hope I made my point clear. I'm sorry, I completely disagree with Matthew Brown's conclusion. There are good people in the government. There are some things that need to be disclosed slowly. And we as human beings, we need to push ourselves to become better and more capable on every level of our being. But we also need to be patient with ourselves and realize we might not be ready to face everything that we're so insanely curious about. No responsible parent hands their child a sharp knife just because they're crying for it, because that responsible parent knows exactly what's coming afterward. And with that, I'm signing off. I'll try to get the Aleister Crowley podcast in here pretty soon. Thanks for listening, and we will connect again.